Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our session on the wage crisis. I'm honored to be joined by two financial experts, Han Liew and Sani Hamid. They've been with us for more than 5 sessions. We'll be talking about the recent wage report released by the Department of Statistics, which highlights the alarming wealth gap between the rich and the poor. We'll address the question of whether Malaysians are underpaid and the possible solutions that can be implemented in order to resolve this crisis. Finally, if we have the time, we will talk about investing in general, what are the details that newbies should look out for, and how to plan their personal finance journey. So before we start the session, I would just like to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Halogen Capital, the world's first Sharia-compliant crypto fund that provides institutional exposure to Bitcoin. Based in Kuala Lumpur, Halogen Capital provides quick and secure access to Bitcoin while removing the burden of buying and safekeeping coins. Conveniently enough, we have the founder here with us tonight, Han Liew. He's both a certified financial planner and a chartered financial analyst, and he's also the founder, ex-CEO of Ringgit Plus. Used to work as an investment banker a few years back before deciding to help Malaysians make better financial decisions. Han, welcome to the session.
Shinji, thanks for the kind welcome. Evening, everyone.
Would you like to talk a bit more about yourself? Hopefully that introduction done a bit of justice. And what is Halogen Capital, this new startup of yours? I'm curious to know.
Right, thanks for the kind introduction again. Hi Shinji. Hi everyone. Evening. Han here. Some of you actually already know my story because you guys might have heard about from me in previous spaces, but here goes. I am Malaysian born and bred. I studied in the UK for university, and then I worked as an investment banker before, during, and throughout the financial crisis in 07 to 09. That was quite a fun time, I guess, in the UK. Came back to Malaysia in 2010, and over the last 12 plus years, I've been a fintech entrepreneur, investor, and you mentioned financial planner, yes, and also I had a stint as a policy advisor on the National Economic Action Council during the Mahathir administration. So in fintech, I was the CEO. Yes, thanks, Shinji. You mentioned it. I was the CEO of Ringgit Plus and founder of Genexu for many years until 2021. Hopefully, Ringgit Plus needs not too much introduction. They are Malaysia's largest consumer financial comparison and application portal. And over the last 18 months, I've been working on the new business, Halogen Capital. So Halogen is Malaysia's first licensed crypto fund manager. We run crypto funds, unit trusts, and eventually, hopefully, ETFs. So just like some of you buy stocks directly on Bursa, some of you prefer to invest in unit trusts or ETFs, right? So in the crypto world, some of you will buy cryptos directly on exchanges in Malaysia, such as Luno or Synergy. And others may want to invest in professionally managed funds like Halogen's offerings. Our first couple of funds are quite simple. The Halogen Sharia Bitcoin Fund, a nice Sharia compliant, easy way to access Bitcoin without having to worry about private keys, logins, all that kind of stuff. Just you get Bitcoin in a classic unit trust. And our second fund is the Halogen Sharia Ringgit Income Fund. Yeah, a place to hold your ringgit while waiting for the crypto markets to come back for you to go back in. So hopefully we can build up from there. And yeah, that's a quick summary on myself and Halogen.
Yeah, thank you so much, Han. I think your connection is a bit bumpy over there because you were a bit, there's a bit of static noise and we could still hear you quite clearly, but maybe you want to switch to your data or something. We'll definitely talk more about Halogen Capital near the end of the session when we are exploring different investment options. So our other speaker here for the night, Mr. Sani Hamid, he's an economist, certified financial planner. I think the majority of you have probably heard from him before. He's a frequent commentator in the media, has over 30 years of experience in the financial markets, having worked for companies such as S&P Ratings as a director in the sovereign team, overseeing the ratings of countries such as Indonesia, India, Malaysia, and Singapore. Yeah, now I'm kind of curious as to what Malaysia's rating is right now. Mr. Sani, welcome back to the session.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, Sinji. Thank you for having me, and congratulations to Han on the new venture. Very exciting. I think it's on the right path. Um, Digitization, blockchain. I think this is really the future, and I really hope Malaysia moves forward progressively, or not progressively, accelerates or move forward in this area, because it's really one of those which I think it's going to be a pillar in the finance industry. So congratulations again, and all the best. For myself, I think Sinji has more or less mentioned kind of my background. I'm also Malaysian, came down to Singapore after my SPM, been here all the while. Currently, my current position, what I do is basically I am the director for investment, in charge of macroeconomics, and also asset allocation in general. So I will set the so-called viewpoints of the market. I will also then set the asset allocation in terms of how to allocate the portfolio. And then we have advisors, about 400 of them here in Singapore, and about almost 100 in Malaysia. These are the guys who will go out and do the typical financial planning with their clients, based on these allocations and based on the client's risk profile. So basically, that's what I do. Look forward to the discussion. Disclaimer is I'm not a social economist. Means to say, wages is something I track and look at. But nitty gritty stuff, sometimes I may speak a little bit in general, but overall, I hope it will help to enlighten the discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Sani, for the brief introduction and also tagging along with your disclaimer real quick. Despite the qualifications of these two speakers, they are both certified financial planners. Yeah, nothing of what we're going to cover tonight can or be considered as financial advisor. So yeah, as you guys have heard, they are extremely qualified to tackle the major topics for tonight. And we'll dive straight into it. The recent quarterly wage report released by the Department of Statistics showed that the median salary of former employees increased from 2,400 ringgit to 2,600 ringgit year over year in March. So you guys may view the data in our Twitter space. We've pinned it right there. And while this increase looks good on paper, deeper analysis of the data paints a very different picture. So when we tabulate the data into a horizontal bar chart, we can see that 82% of employees earn less than 5,000 ringgit per month. And a staggering 35% of the population, more than 1 in 3 Malaysians, they have a salary of less than 2,000 ringgit per month. So the distribution of wealth decreases exponentially as the salary figure increases, but it abruptly skews towards the rich, i.e. those people earning more than 15,000 ringgit per month, which really just shows just how wide the wealth gap is between the rich and the poor. So, Han, let's just start off the session broadly. Are we in a wage crisis right now? And are Malaysians severely underpaid?
Oof, you start off so heavy hitting already. I think wage crisis is one part of it. Right? There's two stories. There's actually a few stories here, right? The first story that is not really told is that the statistics that came out, I think maybe was it yesterday, a few days ago, late last week, right, was for the formal sector. We haven't even gone down to the informal sector yet, right? We talk the formal sector means people in full-time jobs or hourly jobs, but with gainful employment, right? And it was a analysis of over 6 million people, but there are 50 million adults, right? So where are all the around 50 million people in the workforce, right? So where are the other 8 point something million? And those people are in the informal workforce, and I can tell you, some of the statistics there are equally, if not more scary. Right? But let's stick with this. You mentioned wage crisis. Yeah, I mean, the statistics are clear. I guess we have to give some props to this government for actually revealing it. I guess They take it as if it's their first year, so they can afford to do this and spend some political capital. But to reveal this is quite shocking, to say, hey, look, like things are bad, right? Generally, governments don't like to share that things are bad, right? What do I mean by bad? You mentioned it. Median income for wages is 2,600 ringgit. What that means is half the people earn less than 2,600 ringgit in gainful employment. So these are employed people, right? Half earn less than 2,600 ringgit. That's quite scary. And I guess the second story, the first time we mentioned about informal, right? Let's talk about the second thing. Another important step to note, and was mentioned a few times in the media and among a couple of the ministers and politicians, was that our compensation of employees to GDP, that is how much goes to wages, is at a very low 32.6% end of last year. And this is super low in two ways. Number one, it's super low from the previous year. Previous year, I think we were at 35. So we've actually gone down as the economy recovered, right? Meaning, as the economy recovered, let's just say employees did not enjoy the bulk of it, that recovery. And the second scary stat, other than just things dropping, is that 32.6% to employees. Keep in mind, then the other 60-something goes to businesses. Compares with developed countries at closer to 50%. Meaning, in developed countries, already their GDP is higher than us, right? And furthermore to that, 50% of the product or GDP goes to employees. And even in neighboring Singapore, it's over 40%. So don't even count developed, liberal woke nations. Just a highly capitalistic country like Singapore, you expect employees to be pressured, I guess, to accept lower wages versus GDP. I'm not saying lower wages absolutely versus GDP, but in Singapore, Sani, I guess you can confirm this, but it's over 40%, right? So even compared to a very kind of capitalistic society, workers in Malaysia, 32.6 versus Singapore, over 40%. So those two are the points I would say, look, to qualify the statement of, crisis.
Yeah, it's no doubt that we are in a wage crisis right now. And like what you said, I find it really surprising to have the government reveal this statistic, but maybe it's just probably a good step to implement more improvements. And just a quick comparison to Singapore, Mr. Sani can correct me on this also because you are currently in Singapore, right? The median salary as of 2022 is 5,000 Sing per month, which means 50% of the population earn less than 5,000 Sing, while the rest of the 50% of the population earn more than 5,000 Sing. That's crazy compared to Malaysia's median salary of 2,600 ringgit. So Sani, over to you. Are we in a wage crisis right now? Are Malaysians severely underpaid?
Okay. I mean, solely looking at wages itself, sometimes it doesn't tell you the full story. You need to kind of bring in other factors to see whether it's a crisis. So, I mean, just looking at 2006, if the cost of living was well below 2006, then basically it's not a crisis. You're earning enough. But sad to say, and I think you may touch on it later, and you touched on it a little bit just now. There was a survey to say that the cost of living is actually 5,000, something around there. So it is a crisis because it just doesn't cover enough, or it's not enough to cover what we call the cost of living that households face. So it could be a combination of cost of living has increased, but also the fact that wages are not high enough to cover that cost of living. So I think in a nutshell, you could draw the conclusion that it is somewhat of a crisis, because if you just cannot cover your cost of living financially, what it tells you basically is every single month you are raking up on your debt, because clearly if you spend more than you earn, then every single month your debt levels increase. That's the only way you can sustain your expenditure. So it is a crisis from that perspective, in my view.
Yeah. And a good measure of whether Malaysians are underpaid is the minimum expenses required to survive, right? Yeah, we take a look at the studies conducted by, supported by EPF, is the Belanjawanku study, which estimates that a single person living in the Klang Valley requires a minimum of 1,930 ringgit per month. So let's just round it up to 2,000 ringgit if they use public transport. Now the expenses jump to 2,600 ringgit for single people who own a car. Meanwhile, Bank Negara Malaysia's recommended living wage is also pretty close at 2,700 ringgit per month as of 2018. But yeah, is this amount even enough to survive or not? 2.6k to 2.7k. Honestly, as a Malaysian right now, I don't think it's enough lah. So, what do you think, Mr. Sani? At this salary, can Malaysians even afford to save?
You tell me, you're in Malaysia. I was in JB earlier on to see my dad. So we had a meal, 5 people. Not even a fancy food place. Just it wasn't those mama shops or such, but it was just this air conditioned place. You go in, they've got fish and chips. They've got nasi biryani, lamb shank and stuff like that. Each meal or each plate was roughly about 20 to 30 ringgit. Drinks were about 10. So the 5 of us came up to about 207 ringgit all in all. Okay. It's slightly dollar for dollar compared to Singapore. Okay, dollar for dollar. It's for the same type of place, which I can then relate to. It's slightly more expensive. Probably you get it slightly cheaper in Singapore, but even if it's the same price, let's assume that's the case. The fact is, wages in Singapore are much higher than that of Malaysia. So that makes the big difference. That's the primary difference. So we often find things in Malaysia and Singapore fairly same, dollar for dollar. But the fact that the wages are not dollar for dollar makes the purchasing power for Malaysians 1/3 of that of Singaporeans in Singapore itself. So I think that is the key issue, which is the $1 trillion question on how do we solve that.
Yeah, when we're talking about it being dollar for dollar, right? I don't think I quite agree with you, Mr. Sani, because I've been to Singapore just a couple of weeks back. And hawker centers, you can actually have a very nice plate of mixed rice for 3 to 4 Sing dollars. I mean, in KL right now, if you want to buy a big plate of mixed rice with like 2 to 3 different vegetables, right, it can go to double digits already, easily 10 or even 11 ringgit. So
right.
I think that's a whole nother can of worms, right?
Correct. So you've got pressure on the cost side, and you have upward pressure on the cost side, and downward pressure on the wage side. So it doesn't make to be a very good situation from that perspective.
Yeah. So Han, same.
Yeah. I mean, just to let you know. So sorry to interject. So just to let you know, the starting salary for a graduate in Singapore on average is about 4,200. Yeah. And depending on which which type of industry you're in, it could actually be more. So the thing that's very hot now in Singapore is, of course, IT, the digital technology, cybersecurity, information system, and such. And it's just mind-boggling. I'm just looking at the statistics. In 2020, the median gross salary for graduates from the IT and digital technology cohort was 4,760. 2021 it was 5,000, and now 2022 is 5,625. We have graduates, and I saw this in the paper, coming out and now complaining that, gee, how can this be? I entered the workforce and I got 5,000, and the 1 year later, this guy enters the workforce and gets 5,006. I'm behind him already. So it's the other way around. It's like here, people are like making noise because the cohort that comes after them basically just goes up by so much. So it's again, we can discuss this later why that's the case. But once you have what we call this kind of a bit of the mismatch, where the demand side far outstrips the supply, this is the scenario that you get. Yeah. So anyway, pass it back to you first.
Yeah, very interesting statistic that you mentioned just now. Median salary, fresh grads, 4,200 Sing. Starting salary is already so high as compared to Malaysia. Our minimum wage is still 1,500 ringgit. Yeah, Han, same question lah. Bank Negara Malaysia's living wage 2.7k per month. EPF Belanjawanku study estimates 2.6k per month. Is this amount even enough to survive or not? Realistically, let's analyze it. And after this, can Malaysians even afford to save?
Wow, so many layers to that statement. I think if you look at both the Bank Negara and EPF studies, right? They said 2,600, but luckily that's for a single individual, right? They even have an adjustment for married couples. They even have adjustments for married couples with children. So, for example, the corresponding statistic for married couple with 2 children to have a meaningful budget, meaningful expense, right? Or rather be able to survive is the word you use, right? Or at least survive with some dignity, is 6,890 ringgit a month of spend. So you go back to what we said earlier, right? The average wage, right? 2,600 a month. So just about there lah for single. But imagine if you are married with 2 children, both earning this median wage, 5,200. That is way below that number of 6,890. And obviously, there's all kinds of permutations: 1 kid, 2 kid, 1 child, 2 child, single parent, senior citizen, that kind of stuff. But just focus on those 2 groups, right? Single person, 2,006, just nice matches the medium. And married couple, 6,890. Even if you have 2 husband and wife working at that median, right? 5,002. You cannot survive lah, according to EPF, right? And that's one part, right? The second part, you think you cannot survive at 2006 as a single individual with, let's say, a car. 2006 puts you at the 50th percentile of wage earners. What about the other 50% of people, below you, right? So let's not talk about the 2006 number lah. That puts you in the bottom 50 or top 50, regardless of how you think about it. Glass half full, glass half empty. But that puts you in the middle, right? Imagine the 50% of people who are below you in that if you can't survive, imagine the other 50% of people, right, in Malaysia. And by the way, it's not just people who are earning money. So I'm not talking about children, not talking about retirees. We're talking about people who are earning money. 50% earn less than 2006. And if you struggle to save when you're doing at 2006, imagine everyone less. And again, we don't have to go through the individual line items stuff, but you already said some numbers just now, right? A meal, 5 to 10 ringgit, 3 times a day. Housing, transport, etc. You don't need to go through, and that's tough. But a word of encouragement to everyone out there, right? If you're at 2006, right, and you try to live like someone who earns 2,400, that's 200 ringgit saved. So give a bit of encouragement. Any little save is a little that can go a long way to your financial future. So don't lose heart. I know it's tough. It's tough across the board, whether you're single or married with 2 children or more, right? But the minute you put yourself and think, hey, look, things are not great for me, but where am I versus everybody else? Can I do better for myself, for my own future? I think that's something to hopefully give you a bit of encouragement to keep going.
Yeah, thank you so much, Han, for the response over there. I think personally, I find it quite satisfying, or maybe a bit glad that the government finally brought this statistic up, which previously, over the past few years, right, the people who don't really understand the statistic and the wage distribution of Malaysia, right, they tend to blame it on the B40s, right? They tend to say that, hey, B40s, you guys don't have prudent financial habits, you guys don't know how to save, you guys spend more than you earn, yada, 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 that's why you guys are staying there. But right now, we are seeing kind of like a shift, right? B40s are there for a reason, because the reality is that Malaysians are severely underpaid. And you said it just now, 50th percentile, 2.6k, 50% of the population earn less than 2,600 per month. And more than a third of the population, they are earning less than 2,000 ringgit per month, which is just completely unlivable, that salary. But let's get to the root of the problem here. How do we even get to this stage? And are there, any sustainable solutions to this crisis that not just the government officials, but maybe citizens should undertake? Han, you want to take this question?
How did we get here? Did we get here is a long, sad story, I'm afraid. But I'll summarize in three key points, lah, right? Number one, deterioration in our education strategy and outcomes, right? So we had deterioration across the board, lah, whether it's the level of preparedness for our fresh graduates or post studies adults, poor outcomes and poor matching between skills required in the workforce versus skills that were being trained in the education sector. Poor outcomes when it comes to actually executing, right? Even though they had some semblance of a plan, the plan wasn't perfect because there was poor matching, but the execution very poor. And I'll give you as an example, right? Like I think it was one of the there's an education panel that they last week attended by people in previous government and current government, and they said, hey, look, we actually had an education blueprint 2013 to 2025. After 2 years, it was abandoned and not replaced. They just abandoned the execution, right? So that is bad, right? That education was the key. It is the key to unlocking social mobility, higher incomes. Why do I say that? Not just smarter people. It's more about skills, right? If you have skill sets which match, a high income workforce, right? You will have high income workforce, right? So that's kind of cause and effect. So that's number one. Number two, how did we get here? I think starting to come to light, but I want everyone to remember this term. Malaysia gone through something called a premature deindustrialization. What that means is it's actually okay to be less industrial of a country as you become a richer country, meaning you stop focusing so much on like building stuff, making stuff, and start focusing on driving, consumption, services. That means your economy is quite vibrant already. You can really afford to do all these things. But if you close down or you deindustrialize too early, right? That means you didn't get a chance to go into higher value manufacturing first to create a richer workforce, richer consumers to then provide them services. And for me, economy needs to not go through this premature deindustrialization. Like a lot of the developed economies had good industrialization, good industries, high value industries. Then only they focused on the services and consumption sector rather than what we went through, which is we deindustrialized prematurely. And then I guess the one that everyone kind of knows but don't know how to, the third and last point that everyone kind of knows but don't know how to put into words one is you can call it inconsistent policy, you can call it poor governance, you can call it whatever you want. But I think over the last 10 years there's been very poor, not just policy direction due to changing governments, yes, that's one part, corrupt governments, one other part, but also poor execution, right? I think we lost things like the NKRA, tracking, KPIs, planning for our economy, and that also came down to poor planning for us as a country. I think there's so many other reasons, but I will summarize those three. One, educational outcomes. Number two, premature deindustrialization. And number three, poor policy execution and tracking across our economic sectors. Right. So that's how we got there. Sustainable solutions. I think it's a whole other session, but let's just as in the solutions to fix those three things, right? Number one, fix our education outcomes. We need bipartisan support. Both governments, whether it's current government, future government, or not, doesn't matter. Both sides of the aisle need to come together and say, hey, we need to fix this. This is how we think we want to collectively fix this, right? And regardless of which government is in charge, we will continue this. We were very good at that the past 3 years with the semiconductor stuff, right? Changed government 3 times, but semiconductor is still going strong, right? that kind of stuff. So why can't we have that for education for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? And then likewise, the other two stuff. There's so much to say, but I'll stop there and pass it on.
Yeah, good point you mentioned on the policy and the politics not being consistent. Yeah, so our education system itself in Malaysia is also can be quite inconsistent also. I mean, compared to the years I've studied ago, so many years ago, and right now, right, I'm also kind of confused already. Mr. Sani, same question. How did we arrive here, and plausible or possible solutions to this crisis?
Okay. No, I think Hans touched on everything and totally agree 110% on what he mentioned. So I'm going to pick up on some of the things that he mentioned. Yeah. How we got here as an economist, I like to bring in demand and supply as usual. So if you have low wages, then basically it's a function of either you have very low demand or very high supply. And going back to what Hans has mentioned, so you can basically say they should be what we call a dislocation between what the education system is producing compared to what the economy can absorb or what the economy actually needs. And I want to bring in, let's say, for example, the Singapore example, since I'm here. So one thing I noticed about Singapore basically is, once they've set what we call pillars of growth in their so-called economic plans, you tend to see that permeate all the way down, not only to the university level, but maybe even to the secondary level and sometimes even to the primary level. Because they know very well that they cannot leave it to chance. They cannot leave it to like, you suka buat apa lah, And then if you end up with a whole bunch of people going to arts, a whole bunch of people going to accountancy, a whole bunch of people you're just going to miss that so-called pillars that's been set. A lot of thought has gone into where the economy is heading to. And yet you go and study something which either totally doesn't relate to it or relates somewhat but very little. And that is where you have oversupply, even though the demand is there. And therefore, the cohort, like I mentioned earlier, certain cohorts would do extremely well because demand is so high and supply is so tight. So right now, the market always adjusts for itself. Right now, we have a lot of people looking at the numbers, seeing how currently the starting salary is so high for IT. We have a lot of people taking up IT. So in about 2-3 years' time, you'll find that supply will come in to help to meet the demand that is currently here and in the future. So the market will always adjust itself. But if you skew it too much and you don't guide it, you may have this artificially low salaries that ought not to be the case itself. Okay. Number two is still on this subject, on the demand side. It could be also a case where the industries, and this one I stand to be corrected, the industries in Malaysia basically are not high value add. So basically, if you were to even get a job, it's just that it's in an industry where the pay is like that. you don't really get a lot, and so therefore that is a function of policy. If the governments prior to this had actually set out to move the economy up the value chain, to do the sums to say that, look, we've got so much graduates coming out. Most of them are in specific areas. If we find, IT and so on, then we actually need to have industries to accommodate, to absorb these outcoming graduates itself. So it could be a situation where the economy is not structured in a way to absorb the graduates, even though those graduates are high quality and such. So you end up with people who are IT experts or IT degrees and such, but you can't find a job because there's just not enough IT jobs out there. So this is really that demand and supply thing where it just isn't. Although I've spoken about education, on the policy side, it's just not, or or rather, let's put it this way: it's multifaceted. The tax department has to come in. How do we promote this kind of industries? The economic department has to come in. Which are the and I think recently they did. These are the pillars that Malaysia has competitive advantage in over the next 10 years. How do we then set the education system from here, university, all the way down to secondary, even to primary? Can we guide these kids to tell them that this is the areas that you ought to be going in? We won't force you, but this is areas that we will guide you and promote these areas. How do we ensure that every single government department is focused on getting this side of the equation correct? So I think that's really the government side, the policy side, and like I say, the supply side would be the education. So when you get that right, I think it solves a lot of things. The part where I'm very worried about is the execution. Hans mentioned it, because when I look at the documents that the current government has come out, and I read through documents such as this, because in my prior job in the ratings agency, we used to have to go through all these kind of longer term documents. And to tell you honestly, if I put plans that Malaysia comes up with plans that basically maybe even Singapore and some other countries come up, they look quite impressive, and side by side, there's very little difference. That means a lot of thought has gone through. A lot of bright people have sat down to give it a thought. Of course, there are certain things which Singapore may have done better, but the differentiation is not very stark in that manner. So I always believe that Malaysia, in terms of its brain power to analyze what needs to be done, where we're heading, how should we get there, what are the key markers and such, I think all those are basically well thought through and well planned out. It's always the execution. It's always when it comes to on the ground, some of these things just don't make it through to deliver what was planned originally. Or in the worst case, like Hans mentioned, every time there's a change of government, every time there's a change of minister, everybody wants to come up with their own plan so they can be known as the minister that has his a major breakthrough plan and such. It just doesn't work that way. So what we have is these truncations of plans, we have failed delivery, we have low quality delivery, and so on. And that really is something which spoils it all. So all of this, I think, leads to where we are today, in my view. Hans mentioned, and just to wrap it up, the transition of the economy. True, very true. You just look at China. China 10 years ago started off basically what we call very infrastructure intensive. In economics term, we call it very high fixed capital formation growth, building of infrastructure and so on. And that really generates a lot of growth in the economy. And now they've shifted over to the consumption side. So the biggest thing now is when you shift over to the consumption side, then the burden falls on the consumer. Is the consumer strong enough to spend to enable the economy to grow? Because we know that GDP, after all, is a consumption indicator. In Malaysia's case, if the consumer is weak in this particular case because salaries are low, you will find that it will impact growth going forward, because you just cannot depend on infrastructure spending to carry through the economy. Once you start shifting to consumption, the consumer has to pick up the slack. So that's a key thing that we need to unravel. I'm happy to say things that I'm hearing out from the current government from an economic perspective, as an economist and my personal view, they seem to be okay. Things which I think is in line with what I would expect policies to be in order to tackle the current situation. Yeah, back to you.
Yeah, I like the part where you mentioned that the plans are very nice, but the execution is a whole nother story. And considering how often we change our government over the past 2 to 3 years, it's really no wonder that we are kind of in a wage crisis right now. But there's also a whole nother angle here that we can take on a wage crisis, right? That is, if we look at the current minimum wage at a different perspective, right? So current minimum wage in Malaysia is 1,500 ringgit per month. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Sani, Singapore, they do not have a minimum wage, right?
Yeah, no
Yeah, so
minimum wage.
so here's the thing, right? That Economy Minister Rafizi Ramli pointed out. Um, the issue is that employers use this 1,500 ringgit minimum wage as a reference, as an anchor for all the employees out there, including those people who are skilled and unskilled. Okay, so imagine this person is a fresh grad. He studied 4 years in Taylor's University, studied engineering. Okay, come out, he wanted to work at an engineering firm, and then the firm tells him that, hey, I'm going to pay you 2.4K per month. That's the fresh grad salary. And then the guy says, hey, it's not really fair. And then the employer says, it's very fair already, because if you take a look at the minimum wage, it's much higher than the minimum wage. So just keep quiet and work as hard as you can. So then we end up with, IT students being paid 2.4K, engineering students being paid 2.4K, lawyers, doctors, dentists, etc., the whole bag or the whole job system, which is probably maybe the cause or the root of the wage crisis that we're seeing. Han, you want to take a bit of bite on this juicy debate over here?
Yeah, very juicy because I know economy minister Rafizi said it, but he didn't share specific. He shared very anecdotally. He didn't share any specific data to kind of prove his point lah. And for me, I personally think, like if you look at the wages statistics for the first quarter, right? There's something interesting which I'm not sure everyone spotted, but I spotted it. So if you look at I added it to the chat here. So if you look at the chat at the bottom right corner of this space, you'll see what I spotted, right? Which is a huge bump from last year to this year in terms of salaries, right? And what you see is, sorry, for those who are there, I'll explain what it means. A huge bump where lots of people who are earning less than 1,500, for those looking, it's the orange dotted line. That was last year. Gets bumped up all the way above 1,500. So clearly, there's some impact to very low wage earner, right? Suddenly enjoying a minimum wage. And then you go, but what is the employer federation going to say? It's going to bankrupt a bunch of employers. Sure, it might cause trouble to some of the less efficient ones. But we look at contribution of GDP, right, to employers versus employees. That actually has not, the minimum wage last year did not change that in the way that you might think. In fact, it went the other way, which is less compensation to employees. So for me, the numbers don't really jump out to kind of say what our minister to prove what our minister said. So we'll take his word for it. But I can see where he's coming from. But one thing I'll say is, number one, minimum wage, I think probably net positive based on the results from last year. They should probably just keep on going this way. Set out a 10-year plan saying, okay, we're going to increase it 100 ringgit a year for 10 years. This minimum wage, and eventually it starts looking like a 5% increase or 4% increase, which starts looking like inflation, right? Which is I don't say fine, but it's one way to tackle this problem. The problem is progressive wage model as it stands today, if we're going to implement it like Singapore, does not solve the problem for who you mentioned: doctors, lawyers, engineers, IT people, electrical engineers, right? Why? Because the progressive wage system handles or is targeted towards lower wage blue collar income earners. So in Singapore, I think they Sani, correct me if I'm wrong, but they even classify down to the exact activity: cleaning, retail worker, landscaper.
Yep.
And then within the cleaning industry, they even specify where you're cleaning. Are you cleaning a toilet? Are you cleaning a table? Are you cleaning a window? Right? And for me, it's about I don't think the progressive wage system is going to solve the problem about highly skilled employees being underpaid. I think that one just needs better unionization, right? So that's kind of a different solution to the problem. But the progressive wage system will assist those who are currently very far down the wage scale, right? So the guys in that coming up from 1,500 to the 2,000 range? How do I get them further up? How do I give them a pathway? So if I'm a cleaner, I get 1,500 today, right? With the progressive wage model, maybe I graduate from cleaning toilets to cleaning floors and whatever that pathway is. I go from 1,500 to 1,800 to 2,000, right? I start.
Toilet cleaners are actually the second tier. The first tier is the general cleaner.
Sorry.
No problem.
My knowledge of cleaning the cleaning ladder is not so clear.
I also just found out. Yeah.
Yeah, but for example, like with the progressive wage model, there's a path towards skillful cleaners, if there's such thing. And I'll explain what that means. So for example, it's not just cleaner, right? We think of cleaners as just somebody with a cloth and a bucket, but no, right? There are those who can operate the heavy cleaning machinery, right? You've seen those either in a shopping mall or in a car park, right? Where it's large cleaning machines, right? And those people are slightly more skilled because they can handle that heavy equipment and they deserve higher salary. And I think that's what the progressive wage model is meant to do, which is say, hey, look, you have a pathway. You are a cleaner today, but there's a pathway for you to earn a higher income. And that's what PWM is supposed to do, or at least that's what it does in Singapore. And I think it needs to go hand in hand with two other things. This continued increase in minimum wage, we do it progressively, gradually, not like last year, one shot, whack from 1,002 to 1,005. It's more like, okay, this is a plan, we're going to pause this year, but next year, for the next 5 years, increase 100 ringgit. So at the end of 2029, it's 2,000, whatever that number ends up being. Plus progressive wage model, plus unionizing of highly skilled employees, right? Those people should not be outright taken advantage of, right? If you are a highly skilled doctor, lawyer, auditor, engineer, right? There should be protections for against employers who try to take advantage of you, right? Because you are a skilled employee, right? And you should start understanding that as a skilled employee, right, there is a global market for your skills. And I think for me, so far, based on last year's results, 2022, minimum wage went up, but yet compensation to employees as a percentage of GDP went down. So I'd say get the Employers Federation to the table, get the unions to the table with the government, three-party agree on something and agree on those three things, right? Minimum wage, progressive wage, a role of unions. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, the minimum wage right now, it just seems to be doing more harm than good to, especially to skilled workers. Okay, because like what Economy Minister Rafizi Ramli highlighted just now, which I'm still grappling with it, is that the employers tend to use it as an anchor, as a reference. But for blue collar workers, for low skilled workers, that needs to be implemented. Mr. Sani, let's track back a bit. Let's talk more about the progressive wage system, which Han gave a glimpse just now. What exactly is it? Because you're currently in Singapore right now, and what is about all this toilet cleaner becoming expert cleaner, even having a PhD or whatnot? Yeah. Talk to us more about it.
I mean, thanks to you, I've just done a bit of research on it. I mean, I wasn't an expert. I'm no expert now even, but I can just give you an example. Coming off where Hans mentioned the example of a cleaner. So what the progressive wage is doing is exactly what Hans says. It charts out a path for the individual worker to actually progressively get higher wage, but in tandem with higher productivity or higher skill levels. So on the cleaner category itself, at the very bottom, roughly at about 1,005 or slightly or below, you'll find that it's a general cleaner. So the general cleaners get that amount. Then about 1,006 or even 1,007 is where you graduate from being a general cleaner to what they call toilet cleaners / healthcare cleaners / a little bit more specialized type of cleaners. I think outdoor cleaners also falls in this second category itself. So you probably need some training, some special skills, in addition to the general skills, which means that you would have to go for training, your productivity would have increased. Then comes the third category, about 1,009, if I'm not wrong, that would be where you operate machineries. those people who sit on those small little vehicles which have spinning mops and so on and so forth. That one probably about 1,009, and then you go to the supervisory level, which is again slightly above 2,000. So basically, what progressive wage basically does is wages increase, but at the same time productivity increases. Because in economics, what you don't want is you don't want wages to increase, but productivity lags or even declines. Then you're going to have a big problem. The best way to explain this is to give you an example which people may be a little bit more familiar with, I hope, which is debt to GDP. And this is like government debt, hutang, yeah, as a function of GDP. So debt is the numerator, and GDP is the denominator, right? So basically, so when people say governments take on debt, people tend to get worried because they say, oh, you're taking on so much debt. But as long as debt translates into productive use, or you use the debt productively, and you create faster growing GDP, then basically that percentage debt to GDP actually declines, despite the fact that you're taking on more debt. But because your denominator is actually growing much faster than your numerator, your debt to GDP actually at the end of the day goes down from 65% of GDP to 50 to 60% to 55 to 50%. So same thing with wages. Wages going up is not an issue as long as productivity goes up in line with wages or even faster than wages itself. Then you'll find that basically you have much more output, despite the fact that your costs have actually increased. So that's a good thing for companies and for the country at large. Yeah. So again, agree with Hans. This will help the lower income guys bring up their salaries from that base level of 1,005 ringgit and so on. For the guys on the top end of the spectrum itself, I think unions are something, but at the same time, I think one other answer to it could be transparency of wages itself. Sometimes wages are sticky because of the lack of information. And that's why sometimes when we want to switch jobs, we keep on surfing the net, looking at what is the potential wages being paid in the competitor or the place I want to go to. There's even websites, I can't remember the name, Glassdoor or something, where employees will kind of tell you what the employer is paying and so on. So in economics, one of the things which prevents economies from moving to equilibrium is what we call wage rigidity of wage, or wage just becomes inflexible, less flexible, and one of the reasons is because lack of information. So all this talk about making wages more transparent across industries, like without naming names, I presume, will alert employees who are more skillful, who can better negotiate their wages, to then, when they make a move based on better information, and not just thinking, as we tend to always do, that I need to set my wage expectation lower when I move because otherwise they won't hire me. To be honest with you, once you have the skill, once you have that value, it's the other way around. Yeah, you always set high and assume that people want you, and of course you may get it wrong every now and then, but that is the correct approach when you are skillful and at that level. So at that level, yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Sani, just to keep you there
Yeah.
before I pass the ball to
Yeah.
Han, is the question about progressive wage system. Okay, because a lot of people are talking right now is to raise the minimum wage, and also like what you said just now, increase the wage at the same time increase the productivity of people also. But are we considering the impacts on the economy or not, i.e., prices and inflation? So if we increase the minimum wage today, if we implement a progressive wage system, will it not, at the end of the day, raise the spending power of Malaysians and ultimately, increase inflation again? And then we're going to back to a whole nother spiral because, we raise the spending power of Malaysians, then prices go up, etc., etc.
No, because like, as I just mentioned, your cost increase, but your productivity increase. So your unit of production increases. So your cost per unit of production, in theory, if both of them go up at the same rate, remains the same. So for every unit you produce, if your cost, sorry, for every unit you produce, the cost itself divided by the number of units that you produce, which also increase productivity, your unit cost of that particular product doesn't increase. So in theory, as long as the productivity increase, it's not bad. You don't have to worry too much about your unit costs increasing, and therefore producers will push it over to consumers. There's cost push inflation and such. Of course, to a certain extent it may happen and such, but it won't be runaway type of. If I'm a employee, sorry, if I'm an employer, and you force me to increase wages, and yet I can't sell more units, or my workers don't produce more units, then I'm going to pass that cost over to the consumer.
Yeah, that's quite true. Yeah, so Han, I think a similar question also, if we increase the minimum wage, implement a progressive wage system, and tick all the boxes which we covered just now, will it, not raise the spending power of Malaysians, at the end of the day, increase inflation again?
Yeah, I think you look at who you're increasing the wages for, right? Like if you're looking at minimum wage, 1,500 ringgit, any increase there, where is this extra money going to go? Probably highly weighted towards basic goods, food, clothes, very basic stuff, right? Most likely food, transport, clothes, right? Housing, at that level, right? And let's just drill down on the significant thing, which is food, right? Which is a big focus for someone in that income category, getting an extra 100 ringgit, extra 200 ringgit, right? And what we've seen with this kind of inflation of basic goods, right? The main drivers are not so much about demand pool. It's really around the supply side. And you say, okay, but wages are supply, right? True. But you look at the contribution of wage versus raw materials into that supply, right? So for me, it was really inflation for us, right? Is really driven more by that rather than things like minimum wage, right? So you look at minimum wage increasing last year. Was that the cause of inflation, or was that our soybeans, corn increasing the price of our chicken? Was that increase in cost of fertilizer, increasing the cost of all our planted, our agriculture products, right? Things like that, rather than so much demand pull. There is some, but for sure, because of subsidies here, raw materials as a unit of supply is a far bigger factor. So for me, I'd say do it gradually. Progressively is a dangerous word to use now. Do it gradually, right? And if you find that there is you get the marginal increase in inflation starting to bite, that's when you take a step back and say, hey, look, we planned this for 5 years, cool, we stop here, and let productivity catch up on itself. If in fact there was no corresponding increase in productivity, but you got to start somewhere, right? And you might as well start the place where people need to put food on the table, minimum wage.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So very interesting session we had so far. And for those people who are in the audience, yeah, this is an open session. We are now gradually going to transition into the Q&A session. If you have any questions, do just send us a DM, a direct message. If you want to stay anonymous, just say that you want to stay anonymous. Alternatively, you can also comment your questions on the bottom right-hand corner of the space. Or if you are feeling, a bit more confident or yourself and not that shy on speaking in public, you can actually request to be a speaker and talk to these speakers yourself regarding tonight's topic. So the next part of the session that we are going to transition into is more towards the citizen side. What can we do? Okay, so actually what can we do as citizens in order to lessen the impact of the wealth gap on ourselves, especially for those people who are currently earning less than 2,000 ringgit per month? Yeah, so Han, any advice for people earning less than 2,000 ringgit per month? What should they focus on right now?
Wow. Okay, it's a tough one, but I mean, in short, I would say if you are in the lower range of income earners, you don't need the progressive wage model to come into force to do the things it wants to achieve, i.e., set you on a path towards earning a high income, even if you are in the blue collar range, right? So, classic example, you're a cleaner, right? Get an opportunity to learn how to use those machines, right? Get an opportunity to learn how to clean more efficiently, better, right? And then that increase in ability, skill, capability should translate to increase in income, right? And if it doesn't, keep going, keep going. Find an employer which values that. Why? Because it is more productive, right? So they should be valued higher. If you're, let's say, in P-hailing, try and save up as much as you can. Get into e-hailing. It's something that you're already familiar. You get a bump up in income. If you're in e-hailing already, save up. Try and move up the categories. For example, like I know for a lot of the e-hailing providers, they have the basic category, then the next level up earns you higher income, then the next level up. So you don't need the PWM, the wage model, to be enforced for you to progressive wage model yourself, right? And if you're a retail worker, right, learn some sales skills, upselling, adds income to the business, which should translate to you. And if it does not, you can go and find another job which does, because there is no business owner who doesn't want more sales, especially driven by existing employees, right? So things like that, right? If you're a clerk or administrative person, learn stuff like basic accounting, or if not, then stretch scheduling, drafting, Excel, anything that gets you up the skill ladder. The whole point here is not for me to tell you what to do. It's more like in yourself. Like we talked a bit about progressive wage model, right, and how it aims to increase skills and increase productivity to increase your wage. Do that to yourself, right? Self progressive wage model yourself is the is what I can say in terms of increasing your income from your current level, right? Doesn't matter whether you're in 1,500 to 2,000 to 2,500 ringgit to 3,000 ringgit level. You can do it to yourself. Don't have to wait for the government to implement it.
Yeah, those are great points and examples you covered, which is, basically not to be stagnant. Yeah, in your current job, be it a blue collar or white collar job, always be eager to learn and upskill yourself, right? Do the progressive wage model on yourself. Learn to be more efficient in what you're currently doing, like what Hann said just now. And eventually you can either, negotiate a better pay from your current employer, or perhaps move to another employer that really treasures your efficiency. Yeah, Mr. Sani, same question. Advice for those people who are currently earning less than 2,000 ringgit per month to lessen the impact of the wealth gap on themselves.
Um, you basically have two variables to play with, income and expenditure, right? So if you really want to survive, it's either you reduce your expenditure, and I know I'm going to get a lot of flack from everybody because it's just so difficult. A lot of these expenditures are very sticky. So Hans has really covered the answer, which is you probably have to try and find ways to increase your income. And I think this generation, although times are tough, you're lucky because there are multitudes of ways to increase income. Unlike my generation back then, when I was your age, no such thing as getting these side incomes from Grab or from even posting stuff on the internet and stuff like that. So there are many more ways. You just have to be sometimes innovative, and this may apply to people who have less skill sets. For people who have skill sets, who are more in the professional domain, then my answer would be increase those skill sets to make yourself basically indispensable, to make yourself marketable. When you reach a certain point and you feel that your employer is not not paying you what you think you're worth, then look for a new employer. I know it's easier said than done, but I just give you the example of myself. I'm not a job hopper, when I like a company, I stay very long. I've stayed in two companies for 15 years, the current one, and prior to this, about 10 or 12 years. But in between, I have hopped, so to say, every 2 years. And because either I've come to a point where I said, okay, my skill set now allows me to be worth much more than I'm paid, and I know this company can't pay me, so I go and look for a place to go to. You typically, at my rule is typically I would go to foreign companies, because I know for the lack of, I know maybe controversial and such, they tend to look more at skills, and therefore they are very open to, as long as you can show and demonstrate that you're skillful enough and such, you have the experience and so on, they will pay you, they can pay you basically. Okay. So sometimes you need to be selective where you go, and hopefully, I mean, again, with a bit of luck and such, you may be able to hop to a better job, better paying job itself. Okay. So these are things, and I have not done it, but I've seen also courses come out, like learn cyber security over the 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, get a diploma or get a certificate. These are also things which you may also want to consider, especially if you're in the middle part, where you may not be a so-called, I won't say professional, but you've not invested so much so that you're entrenched in your job. You may still make a switch, and therefore you may want to switch to areas which in the coming second half of your career may provide you with much better prospects. So that's also one way of looking at it. So many ways. I guess it really depends on individuals.
Yeah, the part where you mentioned on looking for foreign employers, right, is really self-explanatory. It becomes quite clear on why you went to Singapore for the past 20 or 30 years. When you're a Malaysian, it's looking for international pay, and I can tell you, it's really true. Foreign employers, especially Singapore, right, they are really looking into hiring talent. And for those people in the audience, if you feel that you have a lot of talents that could be of use, maybe you can try applying a job in Singapore and, work out a deal, work from home, live in Malaysia and spend Singapore's salary. That's the dream. You can basically live pretty much like a king over here already, right? So,
No, I mean, that is actually a good
yeah,
point in this way,
yeah.
that who was it that mentioned that to me? I can't recall, but someone was saying that, and it's quite true, when they spoke to Malaysians working here in Singapore, and they were asked, what pay cut would you take to work back in Malaysia, basically, and the majority of them said 2/3. So basically, if you gave me a job in Malaysia, which is 2/3 of what I earn in Singapore, I'm willing to go back and work out of Malaysia, or rather work in Malaysia, not the same job in Malaysia itself, as long as I get 2/3. So I guess it's something which my company itself had experienced. We had a lot of Malaysian employees, not a lot, but basically we had Malaysian employees who during COVID went back to work in Malaysia, and of course did what we call the so-called work from home kind of arrangement. When COVID ended, basically they felt very comfortable. We felt very comfortable that they could still deliver despite working from home, and so therefore there was a negotiation where I think salaries were decreased or reduced. Okay, for the reason that they are now no longer physically here, they're working from Malaysia. But and again, I don't know. I'm not privy to the actual salary negotiations because it wasn't my department, but operational. But I'm assuming even at 2/3 of what they earn in Singapore, now they're with their family in Malaysia. Cost of living may be, I won't say high, but with a Singapore salary, is fairly okay. The arrangement is a good arrangement. Yeah. So whether it's trying to get the arrangement, I don't know whether that's easy, but I do know for a fact that a lot of Singaporean companies are opening up branches in Malaysia in order to take advantage of cheaper Malaysian labour, so to say. And they do pay above Malaysian rates because they're coming from Singapore and so on. So there are these companies which you may want to aim for. They are the usual MNCs like Facebook, Amazon, or whoever is in Malaysia, that Tesla, whoever you also may want to aim for. And so you work towards that because these are the companies who will pay you above the norm in Malaysia, I guess.
Yeah, and probably the dream scenario is to be able to negotiate some sort of work from home type of thing, and you basically get to enjoy a Singaporean salary and spend it in Malaysia. Yeah, three point what? 3.4, 3.43, 3.45 right now. Yeah, okay, on to our second last question. And by the way, guys, for those of you who are in the audience, we're going to transition to Q&A session soon. Any questions, please just don't hesitate to DM us, or you can volunteer to come up as a speaker, ask the questions yourself to these speakers. Alternatively, you can also comment the questions in the bottom right-hand corner of the comment section in this Twitter space. Yeah, another method to probably transition out of a lower salary range and lessen the wealth gap is to invest, right? Is to start early and consistently invest, use the power of compound interest, yada, yada, yada. And on this topic, what should people look out for if they are just beginning? Okay, let's say that they're just newbies, they don't really know a lot about investing. What are the most common do's and don'ts? Yeah, we're going back to the basics over here. Han, over to you.
Ooh, okay. Financial planner hat on, is it? I think before you start investing, you make sure you got your basics sorted first. What do I mean by basics? The first is to make sure you have a monthly surplus. Means, are you spending more than you earn? If you're not, that's good. If you are spending more than you earn, that's not so good. Try and turn that around first. Don't have time to go through all the strategies to do that, but you got to do that first. Make sure you have a monthly surplus. Why do I say that? Because you start investing without a monthly surplus, soon you have to sell your investments to fund your deficit, right? So then no point investing. So first, make sure you have a monthly surplus. Second, with that monthly surplus, make sure you have a cash reserve first. Meaning, even if it's a 500 ringgit, 1,000 ringgit, 3,000 ringgit, whatever number, for emergencies, someone crashes your car, you're waiting for insurance, but maybe you can fix it first and get back to work. Or maybe there's a big issue in your house, got a big leak, need to fix. Make sure that you don't have to sell your investments to cover those kind of things. That's what an emergency buffer is for. If you're thinking of investing, make sure you have an emergency buffer. If it's not 6 months of salary, it's fine, as long as there's something there, even if it's 1,000, 5,000, anything is better than nothing. Third step, once you've got your surplus, you've got your emergency buffer, make sure you have medical and life insurance sorted. Why? Anything happens to your income, no point investing. You'll have to sell those investments, to fund illness or injury. Make sure there's insurance there. Don't have to do investing through the insurance policy. Get it just for the protection, right? And then you can cover in case anything bad happens, right? Protects your investments in case something bad happens. You don't have to sell it. And then fourth, only you start thinking about the investment part, right? There's few ways to go for it. You can do it yourself. Like I said earlier, go to Bursa, buy some stocks, get some gains, all that kind of stuff. But one warning, right? Even experts, and definitely me, struggle to beat the market, right? For me, if you're a beginner to investing, yes, follow Shinji at the Futurists. But for me, classic advice, go with, a diversified portfolio. What I mean by that is mix between local and overseas investments, mix between equity and fixed income and crypto. Nice diversification across the board. You won't go too far wrong, right? You might not have the number one best portfolio, best investment strategy, but by going with a diversified portfolio of those things, you can't go too far wrong, right? And last, I guess, word of warning: watch out for scams. It's all good investing. Investing well, you sorted out your emergency funds, insurance settled, but try not to get scammed. There's two types of scam: the fear-based kind. People threaten their police, LHDN, report you, pay them something, and the greed-based scams. Those the ones that tell you, you make double next year. that kind of stuff. Be careful of those. So yeah, five tips: surplus, cash reserve, insurance, stay diversified and consistent, and last, watch out for scams and stay with licensed players.
Yeah, the gauge that I would like to use when it comes to looking out for scams is when it's too good to be true. Okay, and the reference that I tend to use is the current OPR. So Bank Negara Malaysia's OPR is 3%. You kind of expect the products out there to give you roughly 3, 4, 5% yield. Those are the steady yields that we're kind of expecting in money market funds right now. Yeah, Versa, all these cash apps, they're giving 3, 4%, right? And some of the FDs, they're also giving 4%. When you have a product, when you come across a product that guarantees you 8, 10, or even 15%, yeah, guarantee without any losses, then there is a big red flag there already, because you know what is the current most sustainable rate that money market funds, which really follows the current overnight policy rate, is at right now. So, yeah, I pass the ball over to Mr. Sani. Same question, investing for absolute
Oh,
beginners.
okay. Just let me touch on the scam part because there was a headline, I think yesterday or the day before, here in Singapore, that there's an increase in youth depression because many youths have been scammed. So it results in, low sense of self-dignity and so on and so forth. I'm worthless and such. So it is actually something which has translated into a mental health issue here in Singapore, the number of scams and such. Anyway, full marks for Hans. He's a CFP. I'm a CFP, and seeing him go through one by one, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is what I was going to say. This is what I'm going to say. I've got nothing left to say anymore after he said everything. So exactly everything that he said would have been what I would have said. Given this topic itself, like the only emphasis I would put is basically on the insurance side. Couple of days ago, someone DM'd me and asked me about, I've just started out. How do I invest and such, and it's very typical of a lot of people when they come to me, because I'm an investment person, to kind of ask me, how do I invest, where do I invest in what do I invest in, so on, so on, so on, so on. And I always tell them, like, have you done your insurance? And everybody's like, why are you talking to me about insurance when I'm asking you about investment? Are you an investment so-called expert? And I say, look, basically, you can do everything right on investment. You can make your 20-30% returns every year and so on and so forth. All it takes is one big hospital stay, one big outlay because you are now in a vegetative state, you need high intensive care, whatever the case is. All it takes is one of those things, and your whole plan or your whole dreams, financial dreams, get knocked out because you just haven't prepared yourself. And even for graduates themselves, and even if you're just out new into the workforce, you're not married, you're single, you say, I want to make my million to retire as fast as possible. Why do I have to worry about insurance? I don't have beneficiaries. You forget also basically that you don't necessarily die if you get knocked over walking across the street. You become in a vegetative state. Guess who looks after you? Your parents. You're already working, you're supposed to be a responsible person. Your parents have brought you up over the past 20 over years, put you through school, and now you're burdening them with looking after you because you made the mistake, or some drunk driver smash into you and you're now in a vegetative state, and you've left your parents with the financial burden of looking after you. That is irresponsible. So go out there, prepare yourself for TPD, total permanent disability. If you die off, it's fine, but if you don't, that's going to be very useful for your parents. Prepare yourself with your hospital plans so that you don't get stuck with a huge bill that's going to throw off your financial objectives and so on. So do place a lot of emphasis on this part. When it comes to protection and such. I just wanted to re-emphasize that part, but every single point that Hans has put out is valid points overall.
Yeah, make sure for those of you guys who have not looked into insurance yet, maybe now may be a good opportunity. We're not selling you guys anything. We're not insurance agents over here, so just go and Google search, find an insurance agent. Try to at least have a medical insurance so that, touch wood, in case you are dealt with a very heavy hospital bill, you don't have to, like what Hans said just now, liquidate your investments in order to pay off such a huge sum, because looking at how prices are so high across the board right now, yeah, going into a hospital is definitely going to bite into your pocket. Yeah. So our last question of the night is actually towards Han's new startup, Halogen Capital, which according to the website is the world's first Sharia-compliant cryptocurrency fund, provides institutional exposure to Bitcoin. Yeah, Han, so let's talk about Halogen Capital a while here. Let's take a couple of minutes. What should investors know about this fund if they are interested in learning more? Can they actually invest in it already?
All right, thanks for the shout out, Shinji. Yep. We are Malaysia's first licensed crypto fund manager. So we're fully licensed by the SC. For Sani's benefit, it's equivalent to a LFMC in Singapore. So a licensed fund management company. Here we call it CMSL, Capital Market Services License. We have specific approval to run basically crypto unit trusts. So our first one is very simple. It aims to invest substantially in Bitcoin. So I don't want to use the word Bitcoin tracker, but it gives you a sense of what it is. And for those of you interested, it's currently a wholesale fund, which means you need to be a sophisticated investor. And the minimum entry is 10,000 ringgit. It is the world's first Sharia compliant Bitcoin fund. As far as everyone's told me, I haven't found any which are not. But yeah, so happy to answer any more questions. I mean, this is just the start. We've got a few more products to come. Loads more on the roadmap. The objective, I guess, is to make crypto investing, not just trading, but investing safer and easier for everyone, individuals and institutions.
Yeah, so Han, the common probably misconception about crypto is like, it's volatile and, quite a lot of people still thinking that it's a scam. But we covered this in quite a few of our sessions very briefly previously about how, investing a tiny bit into crypto assets can actually reduce the overall volatility of your portfolio. Would you like to elaborate a bit more on that?
Sure. I think the thing about crypto is there are two main risks. I guess there are many risks, but the two main risks that people like to focus on is number one, market risk, right? So you mentioned volatility, you mentioned large drawdowns. Yeah, I mean, but these if I say the word risk, investment expert will hear the word volatility and then they'll know exactly what to do with it, right? What that means is I size it up within my portfolio, look at the correlations between the asset class and other assets in my portfolio. If there's low to negative correlation, then actually a little bit of that asset, despite the high volatility, adds a lot of value to my portfolio, right? Because you're thinking, hey, in times where there's lots of distress in the markets, this asset might go the other way and vice versa. But in the long run, I should get a pickup, right, on a risk-adjusted basis. So you might end up, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% of crypto in your portfolio, with a lower risk, lower volatility in your portfolio, yet a high return, which is for me the holy grail. And the other risk, I guess, a lot of people are concerned of when they talk about cryptocurrency as an asset class. Mind you, I'm talking as an investing asset class, not as a not as a kind of specific asset, against things like monetary debasement, what's the word to use? Self-governance and stuff like that. It's purely as an investing asset class, right? A big concern, big risk is things like counterparty, specifically relating to scams, cybersecurity risk, third-party custody, right? Somebody else holding my assets, right? And for me, our aim is to address that second risk, right? Which is, we've got a licensed manager, which is ourselves. We've got a registered trustee, both securing the asset with a global custodian. So for me, that's the kind of three-party, no one party can run away with your coins kind of situation. We are bound by local regulations around unit trust. That means that funds don't sit with the manager; they sit in a trust, and investors funds are essentially protected, secured by the trustee, right? Rather than trust me, the manager, right? Don't you have to trust me? I don't hold the coins, kind of thing. So that's the kind of couple of things that I want to say. Like one, market risk. It is well known. It is quantifiable. It can add value to a portfolio. And the second risk, which we as an institution try to mitigate or at least eliminate, if not mitigate for investors, right? As an investing asset class.
Right, yeah. Thank you so much, Han, for the explanation over there. For those of you guys who are interested to learn more about Halogen Capital, I've pinned the tweet over here in the Twitter space. So go and check it out, guys. They're also doing like some daily market updates or something like that. Yeah, Han, I saw, right? You guys are doing like daily market updates on the economy and stuff. Is it daily or is it
Weekly.
weekly? Okay. Yeah. All right. So with that, let's transition into the Q&A session. Again, for those of you guys who have any questions, do not hesitate to DM us the questions, or just step up, apply to be a speaker. I'll approve you guys, and we will talk more about this wage crisis over here. So the first question commented from Ashraf, just wondering if to increase the wages is quite hard in the short term between the stakeholders, can the government give incentive to the companies, such as giving trainings, any benefits, some portion of money to invest? Mr. Sani, you want to take this question first?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, if I'm not wrong, they probably have that in the pipeline. So whether it's, and I think Rafizi mentioned it, fiscal spending, some of the fiscal spending will be shifted towards incentives for the companies to undertake these kind of schemes that the government introduced. So definitely, I think that will be the path. A kind of like, you help the worker, I will reward you. So the government effectively subsidizes the worker to a certain extent, but it's giving kind of the push for the employer to take part in those schemes. So yes, so the answer is definitely, I think that's the path that they will go down.
Okay. Han, you want to take this question also? Increase the wages quite hard in the short term. Government, they need to give incentive to companies, giving trainings, benefits, some portion of money to invest, etc., etc.
Yeah, I think you look at today's announcement on how we might implement the progressive wage model, and I was hoping for a fuller statement lah. Having been in those meetings with the Majlis Tindakan Ekonomi, I know it's a very, very big, long paper. I would like to see some parts of the paper taken out to be announced. But it's okay. Like if Singapore is a model, and it's a pretty good model to look at, you can be sure that one of the statements mentioned was it's voluntary and guidance based, means you the government is guiding, right, and making it voluntary. And naturally you go like, hey, voluntary means no need to follow, right? Well, in Singapore, they give you things like progressive wage, like a stamp for your company if you are. So then consumers know that I will support you because you support progressive wages. Then there's things like credits for training, credits for employing workers within that model. So like Sani said, the model exists in Singapore. Take the best parts, implement it here. And parts which are maybe not so suitable for us, we don't have specific roles that maybe Singapore has. Then take those away, and then keep the ones that are useful for us. But I think for me, the bigger thing to focus on is minimum wage, because that's the one that will drive our median up, right? And give more breathing room to those people who are currently ditindas, or what's the word used, being taken advantage of, and basically just say, look, like that's not acceptable. And keep in mind that also in Singapore, all right, there is a incentive to hire local. Right? So yes, they say, hey, if I increase my minimum wage, then companies will just hire from abroad, foreign workers to drive down the wages. But within the model, there is an incentive to hire local workers in Singapore, right? So likewise in Malaysia, I think that needs to be part of the thinking, that needs to be part of the policy lah. So just to protect against exploitation is the word I want to use. Yeah, protect against that.
All right. Okay. On to the next question for the night. I think this is probably the second last question already. It's from Rada. So, what is the long-term goal? Increase wages and getting larger tax base. Currently, personal tax base is 10 to 15%. What is the tax base of SMEs in Malaysia? So, very scattered at the question. Maybe Han, you can take this question. I don't really grasp the context of this question.
Sure, sure. I think this is a separate but related problem, right? Which is Malaysia has a very, very small taxation base. We are at about 11%, I think, not personal, but taxes as a whole, right? As a percentage of GDP. So for me, I think minimum wage might not help so much, but because our minimum wage is not close to our personal income tax wage threshold right now, which is closer to 4,000 ringgit, right? If you count all the reliefs. But I think the long-term goal, to answer the question, is equitability in our economy towards workers, right? A developed economy has worker compensation between 45, 50%. We don't have to get there tomorrow. In the next 5 years, we can slowly get there. But for me, like if you look at examples from across the world in terms of minimum wage and how that's impacted companies, economies, right? Like especially those that are driven by consumption, right? Progressively increasing the minimum wage actually, whether it's correlated with or causing stronger economic growth in those countries. For me, staying at a low wage is kind of it's a downward spiral from there, right? How low can you go, right? For me, just watch inflation, yes, but we need to increase our minimum wage gradually, right? And that should be a positive impact on our economy due to increased spending, increased social protection because people are able to save. All right, and that should provide a ballast for our economy. So, and that increases taxes. But I don't think that's the end goal of doing this to increase the tax base. It's really about increasing the equitability in our economic structure at the moment. Just to give everyone as good an answer as I can give for that question.
All right, thank you so much, Han. Now we are down to our last question, which I will just pass it over to Mr. Sani over here. How much are wages affected by cultural or psychological makeup? Wow. I.e., are populations with higher confidence, generally Westerners paid more than low confidence populations? Wow, this is quite an interesting topic because I think it's true, I think Westerners, they get paid more than
Yeah.
us. Yeah, but pass it to you.
What we say, pandai cakap.
Yeah, pandai cakap.
Well, it's not, well, let's put it this way, as long as you can speak well, communicate well, sometimes it makes up for the lack of skill compared to another candidate. Another candidate may have a better skill set than you, but if the other candidate cannot at the interview, or at least cannot argue his case on why he should deserve the job or why he should deserve higher pay, then it boils down to communication. So yes, I agree. One of the biggest mistakes in my life, which if I had can turn back the clock and turn around, would be actually this. I've always been a bit shy. Again, whether it's cultural and such, I've worked extremely hard, and at the back of my mind, it's like, oh, my employer will recognize me when it comes to the actual evaluation at the end of the year. And then what happens is I get disappointed because I don't get as much as I think I deserve, and my colleagues, sometimes I kind of sense they get paid more, and then I submit my resignation because I want to join another company, and the other company they recognize my worth, and all of a sudden this employer says, stays back, I will match whatever this other company is paying you, and I'll match even a little bit more. And I'm like, why didn't you do that at the very beginning? So instead I had to go and threaten to resign and throw in my resignation letter before you. So yes, it is an impediment that we probably culturally face, and it's something that we ourselves need to overcome. self-confidence, lack of confidence that we are worth, and we should demand what we are worth. Because it is an important part of this whole thing about career, advancing our career. I think long gone are the days where we just sit back and hope that people recognize our capabilities. We have to market our capabilities, basically, lah. Yeah.
Yeah, words of the wise over there, lah. And make sure you.
Yeah, after kena for so many years, then words of the wise. Thank you.
Comes with age, comes with age, Mr. Sani. Better to learn a bit of qualities from the angmos over there to be able to be more, outgoing, talk a bit more about your talents to promote yourself in order to go out of the lower salary bracket. But yeah, yeah.
But like what I say, I mean, I had the privilege, and also had the blessing to work with foreign companies. First company was actually Malaysian in Singapore, but thereafter it was I'm just going to go through very fast. American, French, back to American, then after that British, British / Australian, and then back to basically American, and now Singaporean. But you see, in between, it was basically a lot of foreign companies where, again, from the work wise, they do recognize your work. They are able to pay, but that I would have probably gotten more. I would think so if I had marketed myself a lot better, basically.
Yeah. Okay. If we could reverse the time, you would have. If you were 25 years old right now, but. Yeah, I think that brings us close to the end of our session already. Let me just really do a quick summary of what we've covered in this close to 2 hour session. It's been really enjoyable, yet another insightful session. So yeah, it's no doubt that Malaysia is in a wage crisis right now with our median salary of 2,600 ringgit per month. Half of the population is earning less than this amount, while the remaining half earns more than this amount. Really highlights the very wide wealth gap. Okay, the solutions to this crisis is to gradually implement a progressive wage system. That means you increase your productivity while increasing your salary. Focus to raise the minimum wage first to ensure that those poorer people have enough to support themselves, and also enforce consistent policies and education. Yeah. When we move on over to citizens, what can we do in order to lessen the impact of the wealth gap on ourselves and transition into a higher salary bracket? Well, first of all, learn to upskill yourself. Okay, never be stagnant. Learn to be efficient in whatever you're doing. Always be eager to learn. Yeah. Then after that, start to negotiate a better pay with your employer if you feel that you deserve a better pay. Okay, better to raise the issue up. And ultimately, if you don't get the pay that you want, maybe try and look for an employer that appreciates your current talents, or just go and apply a job with Han or Mrs. Sani. Maybe they will appreciate your talents. Okay, if you have a talent in one of the areas that they're currently working on, or maybe just work in Singapore. There's a 3 times higher currency compared to Malaysia. Another method to transition out of the lower salary range is to start your investing journey right. Okay, and a lot of people, they tend to just jump right into investing straight away without considering the fundamentals. Yeah, the first fundamental that Han mentioned just now is to ensure that you always have a monthly surplus. If you're currently spending more than you earn, you should first figure out how to spend less than you earn. Okay, then work on your emergency funds. Have at least something in order to cover for an unexpected event. The norm is to have roughly 6 months of your salary, but if you have about 1,000 or even 5,000 ringgit, that's good enough. At least it's better than nothing. Next is to have insurance. This one is what a lot of people tend to skip. At least have a medical insurance so that, touch wood, anything happens to you, you don't have to pay a large hospital bill. Then the last step is only is when you start to consider investing into different types of assets, etc., etc. And especially if you have a sum of money and you really don't know where to invest after you tick all the previous boxes already, do not hesitate to consult a financial planner. Yeah, these two speakers over here, I think they are accepting direct messages, or you can just message us. We are not financial planners, but we will direct you to one. Okay. So I think that really wraps up the entire session for tonight. I will pass the last words to both of these speakers. Han, any last words for tonight's session?
Yeah, I think just given tonight's kind of title as wage crisis, right? It can be very disconcerting. It can be very demoralizing, demotivating to hear all this, right? So sorry if I made you feel that way, but I think like not all is lost. Just remember, you are in control of your own future, right? Your income may not be where you want it to be, but you can do something about it, right? And if you feel exploited by your employer because they don't value your skills, despite increasing, just remember, right? A smart business owner will reward employees which bring value to business with their skills. So continue increasing your skills, you can make a difference to this race crisis. It's not something that you can't do anything. Remember, we are all part of this median, right? We all make up this median, meaning we are on either the left or right in the middle of this median. So we can do something about it, each in our own way. So keep fighting, guys. And as always, as Shinji said, my DMs are open. Just shoot me something. Got a question? If I can answer, I'll answer. If I cannot, I'll maybe point you to someone who can answer.
Yeah.
So thanks again, Shinji, and thanks everyone for listening.
No issue. Mr. Sani, last words for tonight's session for the youngsters.
Okay. Yeah. No, thank you very much for mentioning the youngsters. Yeah. Go and have a thorough look at the current latest economic plan, the Badini, was it transformation plan or economic plan and such. Identify the sectors that the plan has put in place to be the so-called anchor sectors for the economy over the next 5-10 years. What I've seen so far in the short period of time that this government has come into power is that they are modeling themselves based on a few key countries. One of them is like Singapore. So good things we follow, no issue at all. That having said that, that would mean that capital, infrastructure, everything will be focused on those sectors itself. And I told you about the example where IT in Singapore now is just so hot that salaries increase way above what the norm is. It's really high, but it's even higher than that. So what I'm trying to say is, if things go according to plan, these sectors boom, there could potentially be a shortage because, again, those, I don't think everybody's going to focus on these sectors. So if you're there, there could be a so-called demand and supply imbalance. So if you're lucky, you would actually benefit from that. And you can rise extremely fast when you're there at the beginning, because I've seen it before. Singapore, in terms of being a financial sector or center, I was lucky to a certain extent to be at a point where it was booming. And in a situation where there's a shortage of experienced people in a sector itself, companies will just line up and pay to get you. So you really want to be in that situation, and you can only be in that situation if you put yourself in that situation. So study the plans well, make a plan yourself, and then it would probably narrow the odds in your favor that you will do well in the future, inshallah.
Yeah, thank you so much for the points over there, Mrs. Sani. And I hope you guys enjoyed the session. And if those people in the audience, if you guys could do us a small favor, just give these two knowledgeable speakers a follow. It really just takes 2 seconds. Click on their profile, then click follow. And at the same time, right, follow us at the Futurist as well. You wouldn't want to miss all the financial content that we post. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for joining. Once again, thanks so much, Han, Mrs. Sani. Goodbye. Good night. Stay safe out there.
Thank you.